Hello and welcome to Fascinated by Fungi Live. Today I'm going to be speaking with Eleana Hsu, who is the founder of Shared Cultures and is a tinkerer and a microbiologist and a sort of fermentation guru of all sorts. She does all sorts of really interesting things with Koji or Aspergillus, and we're going to talk some about that process, how she learned, what she's experimented with. We're going to talk a little bit too about, I think she got back from a trip in Oregon, and I want to hear live vicariously about her experience finding some morels. So I'm going to get her on the call here and we will start talking about some cool stuff. But per usual, what I'm going to do, the format of this thing is I'll keep an eye on the chat, but mostly it's just going to be Eleana and I going back and forth. So if you guys have questions, you can put them in the chat, but probably won't address them directly unless it sort of fits in the conversation that we're already having. But I will post this afterwards, so by all means, feel free to watch it afterwards and leave comments and ask your questions there. So I am going to get Eleana on here. I'm not sure if she's here there she is, as Shared Cultures. Alrighty. Hello.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You just got back from a trip though, huh?
Yeah, I've just spent pretty much the entire day just kind of cleaning up, laundry, sorting through food, all the stuff that happens after a camping trip. Yeah, so.
So you were up in Oregon, and was it Southern Oregon you were in, or where were you at?
We were in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay,
so
that's pretty far up there.
Yeah, 9 hours.
That's a drive.
Yeah, I'm so lucky because my partner Kevin loves to drive, and we listen to podcasts or music and talk, and it's nice. It's like the only time kind of that you kind of get with somebody for a few hours, or 9 hours in this case, to have alone time where you're kind of disconnected from technology in a sense, not on our computers. I was on my phone for part of it, but we get to like hang out and talk and have some meaningful conversations. So it was awesome.
Yeah, good. That's good. And I assume you found some morels, possibly in burn sites?
Yeah, we were super lucky. Actually, we had consulted with Kristen and Trent from Modern Forager before we left.
Nice.
They, if anybody or people don't know about them, they make these they're based in Colorado, but they make these amazing burn morel maps that are super helpful. And one of, on the maps, we're trying to figure out which burn sites we should check out. And upon the recommendation, that they were saying it's a little early, check out the low elevation. And one of the sites we went up to I can't remember, I think it was the Willamette National Forest. There's a big burn there, and we were a little early. It was still kind of too cold out. So we decided to drive south where it would be warmer, and we managed to find some. So yeah, it was awesome.
What elevation did you find them at?
We found them at 1,000 feet.
Okay, so yeah, very, very low.
Yeah,
which is a really, we are at the very, very beginning of Morchella season. But cool. I'm really glad that you got a few to come home with. So that's good stuff.
It was awesome. 55 to be exact. So, it was awesome.
Which is probably the exact soil temperature that the soil needs to be to at least let those Ascomyces seeds start to fruit. Because I think a lot of people don't, they just assume morels pop up, but there's like, morels almost seemingly more than any other mushroom have this very specific type of habitat and exposure and soil temperature particularly that they really need. And if you don't have those things, you're just never going to find them. It doesn't matter how long you walk around. It's not about being in the right habitat. It's just like it's got to be all of those things aligned for the stars to come together and you to find morels. So
we didn't really know that, prior to going, in a sense. Like we had to do some research, and you take all this time and energy to go out for a trip. You really want to make sure you're doing everything.
Yeah, especially if you're going to drive 10 hours up to Oregon, like you don't want to come home empty-handed.
Yeah, so we started reading a little bit more about them, and like the soil temperature is super important, the elevation super important, which side of the mountain you're hunting on super important. So, all of that with good planning, and we are super lucky to have Trent and Kristen's help. And, we got out there and it was great. So it was really, really great.
Did you see, so morels are usually fruiting around other Ascomycete fungi. Did you see some other like little cups and things interesting in the soil?
Yeah, so we saw a lot of those black velvet cups
Mm.
actually on day one. So where we were at in the Willamette Forest, and I was actually reading that that's a good sign that morels are coming.
Yeah, they're coming. They're not there yet, but they're coming.
Yeah, they're coming. So that place was just covered in that, and I thought it was a wood ear because we don't really get wood ear here in Northern California,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
but then I was upon kind of really looking at it, it's like, no, the texture's off, everything, but when I first saw it, I was super excited. And then, I don't know what they were, but they looked like little orange lentils on the floor.
Hmm.
So that was really cool. I'm sure you could tell us a little bit
I think
more
they're
about
called
that.
the charcoal eyelash cups, maybe Anthrophobia, but I don't know if I pronounced that right or if I even have the right genus. But it's a lot of those Ascomycetes are weird and funky and not super well defined.
Yeah,
So there's sequencing work and other things need to happen. So
yeah,
we're not the people to like take all those things and put them under a microscope and run the DNA, but we know people that do that stuff. So that's cool.
yeah, yeah. So that was cool. And yeah, and then we saw like some, I think I was looking in the book there, I think they're called fairy farts, but maybe that's just the common name, but I
That's a
can't
good
remember.
common name. I like that,
They're
fairy farts.
small little cup fungi. So that was really, really cool. And the place was just covered. I mean, we've never seen anything like it when you're walking in. We've never hunted in a bird forest, first of
Mm,
all.
hmm.
We've only found
Hmm.
natural morels last season. And
Oh
hunting
yeah.
in a burn forest is really interesting because, it looks so depressing and it feels like there's nothing there, but when you
Right,
look
you're like, why am I
further,
here in this dead, lifeless place? And then you're like,
yeah,
wait, why is there orange and purple stuff all over the ground? Like, what's
yeah.
happening here?
It's pretty amazing. There's so much life in a dead forest that you would just never think to that what was there unless you get out of the car and just go for a hike and open your eyes. So it was magical. And of course, it was so exciting to see those morels the second day when we were out. So what's interesting was the second day when we went out, we saw less cup fungi and more morels,
Hmm.
which is really good. But it's like, wow, it's interesting how there's less cup fungi out now, probably
Hmm.
because the morels are now
Right, you
starting to
watch
come
that
out.
secession as things kind of fruit and
Yeah,
move through, and that's one of those things you like. That's what I learned last year was really keeping an eye on those other Ascomycetes as
yeah,
being the sort of the telltale things of did I miss the morels? Is it too early? Is it too
yeah,
late? And that's and again, like with morels, it's not like you should go home. It's like maybe you should drive up or down by a couple hundred feet, or like check the north versus the south side and that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Or just carrying a
definitely.
thermometer with you and jamming it in the soil all the time. Although the fungi don't really seem to care; they're just going
Yeah.
to fruit when they want to fruit. So,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So it was a great trip, and I could not have asked for anything. You go out there, you never really we always tell ourselves don't expect anything, but of
yeah.
course, you're hoping. So that's always,
Well,
yeah,
especially when you drive a long way. I mean, it's one thing if I drive to a local park and I'm like, ah,
sure.
there's nothing here, whatever. But it's a
Yeah.
lot harder, especially days if I take the time to go to Salt Point or something like that, and I feel like I got skunked. I'm just like, meh. I know I'm not supposed to go with expectations, but it's hard not to feel a little bit
Of
let down.
course.
And I think
Of course.
anyone who's been in mushroom hunting for a while knows that, like, yeah, you see those videos of us finding lots of mushrooms or a huge basket of stuff, but like most of the time being in the woods is just disappointment. It's like fishing, once in a while there's like bouts of excitement, but most of the
Yeah.
time you're just like, there's nothing here.
I
So,
know, I know. We took a friend out recently to Marin to look for candy
mm,
caps, and we had
hmm.
just scored a bunch. And I found a bunch of old growth oak trees in Marin, and Marin has a lot of that. And we went out there, and was so excited to show her. And as soon as we got out of the car, there was one candy cap, and of course we are like, "Oh my God, yes, they're
Yeah,
out! We
yeah, they're
found them!
here.
They're here!" And 3 hours later, we only still had one candy cap in the bag,
Oh,
and I was like, so and I didn't know what to tell her other than that's mushroom hunting for
yeah.
you. Like you either all the times we post our pictures where we're finding a lot, obviously we're excited about it, but there are many times where it's like, oh, well, found nothing, edible at least, or worth
Well,
posting about it.
that's where having your macro lens and being able to like throw that on your
That's
phone and
fair.
take some pictures of little things, like, because that's what
Yeah.
I do, and I'm like, okay, there's
Yeah.
nothing big and edible. I'm gonna slow down. I'm gonna try to look at the little things. I had one experience recently. I was in Napa and I was like, there's nothing here. So I was, you know what? I'm gonna start picking up trash because
Yeah.
there's so much like discarded bottles
Yeah.
and condom wrappers and just gross stuff all over the parks here that I think it's the high schoolers who leave it. But I was starting to try to clean it up. And in the process of looking for trash, I found mushrooms. So I was like, good, that's karma, And I think
Yeah,
everyone can remember that. If you're
definitely.
not finding mushrooms, at least pick up the trash and maybe you'll find something cool just because you're looking. So
Definitely, definitely. There's always so much stuff out there. Sometimes it's like shocking to me that people are comfortable throwing that stuff in the wilderness. It's like
yeah,
it's really sad, but that's a whole
yeah,
other subject because we see it all the time too. So
absolutely. But
yeah,
guys, if you're out there hiking and you're with somebody who's going to throw something away, be like, hey, I'll put that in my pocket for you. It's everyone can do their little part. Or just having
definitely,
having a little sack in your backpack you can throw some refuse into. So although
definitely.
I go to a lot of places where there's like car tires and like pieces of bed frames and doors and stuff like that, and I'm like, I can't hike it with
Yeah,
that.
we've seen that too sometimes, like old cars or like bed frames or sofas, and it's like I guess maybe the car thing I get,
Yeah, the car
maybe
makes sense, but the bed frames, I don't understand.
no, that doesn't make sense. Somebody intentionally illegally dumped there, and it makes me, it makes you sad, and you're like, well, that's not cool, but what can you do? At least with the small stuff. The thing I really hate though is like the doggy poop bags
Yes.
when
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're
people,
like you took the time to pick up the poop, put it in a bag,
oh.
and then leave the bag where the poop can't biodegrade it. Oh, yeah.
That's the worst. That's the one thing I see all the time that drives me nuts because it's like, why did you even bag that up? Just like you could have just dug a little hole in the ground and like kicked it into the hole, and then that would have been okay, but
Yep.
to put it in a plastic bag and then leave it there, that's not okay. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
seriously, dog owners, you guys are on watch. That is my number one pet peeve, especially here
Yeah.
in Napa. I see it all too often.
Yeah,
So
we see it all the time
anyhow,
too. So
so beyond your trip to Oregon, I was trying to tell people a little bit about your work with shared cultures and just. I mean, I think I met you early on before you'd even really gotten
yeah,
your wheels going.
yeah.
But it's been pretty incredible to watch your evolution and
Thanks.
try some of your early stuff and now see these things packed up in cute little packages. And
Thanks.
it seems like you've really got it dialed in.
Uh,
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about what inspired you to start Shared Cultures and what is Shared Cultures?
so Shared Cultures, we're just a small San Francisco-based food company based in San Francisco, and it's me and my partner Kevin who are currently the only ones doing it, although it always feels like it would be nice to have some help. But probably not for a while. We want to, just try to keep it as scrappy as possible between the two of us. But we specialize in Koji ferments. And for those who don't know what Koji is, it's a mold-based fungi, similar, just, very similar to how a fungi reproduce. A Koji comes from spores. We take the spores, we propagate. The substrate for us would be like rice or beans. And then we take the mature fungi, which would be the mold fungi, and use those enzymes to break down proteins, which produce umami flavors. So, for example, like miso or like soy sauce, for example, is a good example of that. Or, you could grow it. The Koji also produces amylase enzyme, so it breaks
Hmm.
down like starches and things
Yeah,
like
really
that.
good breaking down starches. Yeah.
Yeah, and that turns into sweet things, which can then turn into alcohol.
So I know it's used for brewing sake, because that's
Yeah.
in beer they use barley, which contains amylase. If you malt the barley, then you can get the amylase out of it, which converts all that sugar or all those starches into sugar. But then in sake, they get the amylases from this Koji fermentation, and then they use yeast to ferment those sugars into alcohol. So.
Yeah. So we mostly concentrate on growing Koji on actually rice, and from there we mix it with with beans to make miso, or we'll grow them on beans itself and make soy sauce. So right now we have different types of ferments going. Some are actually alternative, so instead of soybeans we're using like fava beans, for example, yellow split peas, and we actually have one.
But all legumes, right?
All legumes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been really fun because we're just we're still really early stage. We're trying to figure things out as we go. But the most exciting thing is just trying to translate our passions for fungi, for fermentation, and kind of create products that are more modern or more tailored to our tastes. I think that a lot of these ferments, they haven't been reimagined really in like a consumer package space yet. It's always been, your traditional soybean miso or your traditional soy sauce. And there's so much more to that other than just using soybeans. Not saying soybeans aren't sexy or anything like that, but it's just, like I grew up, even though as an Asian American, my mom made a lot of, Chinese food or Asian food. There are a lot of times where I ate lentils growing up. She would bring those home from her friends who are American and, try this out, oh, okay, lentils, oh, split peas, oh, quinoa and all of these things. And so I grew up eating all of that, trying to, my mom was always trying to feed me the healthiest things she could find. So we're just, between Kevin and I, we're really just trying to kind of just reimagine these ferments using our traditional backgrounds, but just reimagining them for who we are as people and who we think like our generation of folks would be excited about. So
well, I mean, really I was gonna say, if you think about like the history of where Koji came from, it's Aspergillus oryzae, which is like I think it was probably associated with rice, and that was probably what led into it being part of sake making and being fermented with soybeans. But that's what they had in abundance in Asia. And what we have in America is potentially different stuff. And so I think it's like the authenticity of what you're doing is really cool, because you're just taking what's around and applying the same sort of method to the ingredients that are local or that are, in your environment. And so you're just like, reimagining what a traditional ferment is by just changing the substrate, which is great, because that's like world over. You see very similar products occurring from culture to culture. Like alcohol has been evolved by everybody on earth. Everyone figured that out. And it's not because human beings are crafty. It's because yeast are everywhere. And Aspergillus is everywhere. But I think an important thing to mention is that Aspergillus is, oryzae is what's known as generally recognized as safe, or a grass organism. And there's other species of Aspergillus that are very serious food contamination risks. So you can't, unlike a sourdough, you can't go out and just like start your own Koji starter, because you could very easily start culturing one of these toxic Aspergillus species that make aflatoxins and other mycotoxins that are pound for pound some of the most like carcinogenic substances on earth. So like this is not something you want to mess around with. Like, you have your good Koji strain that you work with. This is not something that like anybody at home can just take a piece of moldy bread and be like, I'm going to make Koji out of this. Don't do that.
Definitely not. We get our spores from Japan. So when they come from a 9th generation spore producer, which is pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool. 9 generations of
9th generation
of a mold grower.
Grower.
What percentage of their genome is mold at this point?
I don't know, but it seemed pretty normal to me. But it's it's been really cool to support them and for them to see kind of this new, hopefully through all this new interest in fermentation and with Koji, I'm not saying it will revive a family business, but it definitely puts more interest. There's just more people buying spores now, not just to make traditional products, but a lot of chefs now are really interested in Koji, and even like malting, or like even like making beer, like malting beer,
or potentially using those
yeah,
enzymes in different types of ferments and non-traditional uses. But like,
yeah,
I mean, the food industry, like people don't know this necessarily, but the food industry has been wise to this for years. They've been growing Aspergillus and harvesting enzymes, whether it's amylases or lipases or pectinases. Like
yeah,
this is a mold that grows on plants. So its job
yeah,
is to break down plant materials. Can
yeah,
you think of other places we'd want to break down plant materials? Like virtually any food process could potentially benefit from these enzymes. So the food industry and biotech has been growing and harvesting tanks of stuff and producing commercial enzymes for
yeah,
years and years and years. But instead of focusing solely on the enzyme, you're focusing on the organism and the extra flavors, the metabolites, all the other sort of intangibles it brings to the food that you're fermenting with it. And that's, to me, that's really
yeah.
cool, especially as you explore unusual substrates. And like, I think you had you made me try like a yellowfoot, was it a yellowfoot miso? It was some sort of cool thing you did with yellow feet
Oh,
chanterelles that you
it might have.
cogified them somehow.
It might have been, and that was probably pretty early on.
It was, yeah.
I was experimenting with a lot of mushrooms in the beginning, and there's probably a small batch one that I made. But as I kind of grew from that, then I started making like 5-gallon containers, and now we're at 15 for our morel miso because we sold through the 5 gallons so quickly. But I can't remember. I do remember making a yellowfoot chanterelle one, but I remember it was very small. And I
yeah,
honestly,
I mean, I had like a cracker's worth, and I was like, oh, this was really good, but like I don't know how you're gonna scale this. So
yeah. So same thing, same thing with the morels. We're actually sourcing now our morels from Far West Fungi because it's hard for us. The last batch we made, we did incorporate some of the morels we found last year, but it's just hard to, how do you scale something like that? Right. It's nice to have such a great local mushroom company in town that supplies all this stuff. So,
and you used to work there, so I mean, hopefully they've got your back. Are they selling any of your products yet? Because they should be.
No,
Come on,
not
Far
yet.
West.
We're in the process of figuring some stuff out. I actually still work there part-time. A lot of people don't know, but I still work there part-time, and my partner Kevin works there full-time. So we still have jobs right now as we figure this out, and trying to figure out balancing everything to try to make it work, and they are just the nicest and best employers and people we could ask for, in terms of even like guidance, like, oh, how do we do this, how do we do that? General food production kind of questions. They've been really, really helpful, so we feel really blessed to know them and work for a great mushroom company. So
cool. Yeah, I love Far West. They've been really good to me too. So so I guess I'm curious in talking about all of these things that Aspergillus can do and some of the products that you guys have. Miso, you have soy sauce, you have sort of random Koji aminos. I think you have some dried Koji salts. You're doing a lot of things with this. What's the most sort of successful, interesting Koji ferment that you've tried that you like that might not be something people are familiar with?
Yeah, so right now our split pea sauce, I love our split pea sauce a lot. It's fermented just like soy sauce, but we use split peas instead of soybeans. So that to me has been one of my personal standout favorite. The fava bean actually is also one of my favorites too. Same idea, just substituting the soybeans for fava beans. Something about the flavor, it's really hard to describe. It's, I've been trying to read more scientific papers about this stuff, just teaching myself. I don't have a food science background or anything like that. So it's kind of hard for me to get through some of the literature or the scientific research sometimes. But I try to at least commit, 30 minutes or something a day to just break down a scientific journal. But as I understand, there are over 300 flavor components in these ferments. So, if I pulled out the paper, they list every single component.
It's probably like lactones and esters and all these different chemical secondary metabolites that yeast or fungus is producing as ways of shunting off electrons and stuff like that. So detoxifying things.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And for me, it's like, wow, but that's what makes these things so delicious. Especially if you can just imagine how delicious soy sauce is, and everybody knows what soy sauce tastes like. But if you can just substitute, just in your mind, if you can imagine with a different bean, it really is extraordinary. So those have been actually my favorites so far that I have made, in terms of just like ease of use, and like I can just put some on my avocado toast, or even if I'm
Right.
making tacos, not necessarily Asian food. And that's the one thing we're really trying to kind of figure out, or build a brand over, is that it's not, even though these techniques come from Asian practices, we're just Asian Americans in a sense, and we're trying to make food for everyone, in the sense that, like, soy sauce, most people categorize soy sauce like, oh, like it's just for like Chinese food or sushi or whatever. But with all of these other ferments, the thing that's really exciting is that there isn't really a stigma attached to them. It's like, okay, well, you could use this fava bean sauce or this yellow split pea sauce for Mediterranean food, which we often make, or tacos, which we often make, avocado toast, even in pastry applications, having that sweet and salty kind of flavor
Well, and
tone.
and just there's so much umami in there too. I was
Yeah.
watching a live with David Zilber like a week or two ago, and someone was asking him kind of like, what's the secret to flavor kind of thing. He's like, I use Marmite all the time, which is like basically just broken down yeast stuff. It's not that dissimilar from like a soy sauce. And he's like,
Yeah,
I like to add it to vegetables, but I add it just below where you can taste it. He's like, I put in
definitely.
just a small amount and stir it in. I feel like you can do the same thing with soy sauce. You're like, I'm going to put in enough that the flavor of this dish is not defined by the soy sauce, but it's in
Definitely.
there, and you get all of those inositols and different umami compounds that just make your tongue sing. And you're like, God damn, why
This
is
is
this
so
so
good.
good? And you're like, I
That's
got my secret soy sauce,
that's the
or
thing.
pea sauce.
Definitely. And that's the thing that we're really excited about. I know there are a lot of times where I cook and Kevin doesn't even realize that I've put some sort
Mm.
of our products in there, but there's
I do
always
that with
something.
porcini powder and everything I
Yeah.
cook. And Jerry's like, why is this so good? I'm like, shh, porcini.
Yeah, for us, it's especially when I cook. I know when Kevin cooks, well, Kevin uses a lot of our ingredients too, but I think I probably use it a little bit more than him. Just because I don't know, I just like feel like so strongly in putting miso or putting soy sauce in, or even these alternative sauces in everything we cook. You don't really taste it. It's more like, oh, the flavor is just so good, but
Yeah,
it's not
yeah, yeah.
like, but you don't know why, Well, I know why,
I've been
but
putting miso in all my cream sauces recently, and like not a lot,
yeah,
but just like a little bit, and it's just like, whoa, why is this cream sauce so like I'm literally licking the plate. I'm like, I'm
it's
kind of
so
embarrassed and
good.
glad that it's quarantine and no one's over here watching me lick the
Yeah,
plates in my
yeah.
kitchen. But
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think like miso in the beginning, we were making like miso compound butter. In our early days,
oh
we actually
yeah, 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 yeah.
sold some of that, but it was hard for us to ship. It was hard for us, so we just
Mm,
like decided not to do it. But miso compound butter is one of my favorite things. Even with like
totally.
miso, and like it doesn't have to be like dairy butter. Even with like coconut oil, I really like, or
Mm.
ghee, which is really delicious. Just
That makes sense because the
you
fat
get
is helping to
fat.
spread the flavors, and it just
Yeah.
brings a lot of. I mean, I know for my birthday a couple of years ago, my buddy and I made a huge batch. We took like an entire container of miso butter and like several pounds of butter, or
Yeah, yeah.
sorry, miso
Miso
paste and butter,
and
and just
butter.
mixed it all together, and then took it, and my friend got like 1,000 oysters, so we just grilled like oyster after oyster with miso
Yum.
butter, and that was oof. It
Oh
was a
yeah,
good birthday.
I'm definitely thinking, because that to me is just like heaven. I eat miso butter when I make it just out of the jar, which is pretty bad. But I mean, growing up, I used to kid that like licked butter. Like I just hold the stick of butter and like walk to my room, and my parents would be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It's really good." So, but then I discovered miso, and then when I would be
Mm,
making the miso butter, I definitely would do the same thing, just
yeah,
licking the spoon.
lick the
So
spoon.
good.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so
So
that's
good.
that's some stuff that's worked out really well. And I know that another thing that I tried from you that I thought was really cool was for a while you were doing like Koji charcuterie, and it was sort of
Yeah.
like roast vegetables that you were coating with Koji and then letting them age to various points and kind of slicing
Yeah.
them thinly, and that was a flavor experience and a really interesting textural thing. Are you
Yeah.
still doing that stuff, or is that something you do at home, just kind of
We
not commercially?
we
Because
haven't
I can understand it being hard to scale.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, the Koji charcuterie. We haven't actually made any recently, but I have thought about doing it again. It's just a lot of work in
Yeah,
terms of
maybe like a limited batch, small release kind of thing, you know?
yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking about doing that. It's, just thinking about the work, sometimes I'm like, oh, but
Yes.
not to say I'm afraid of hard work, but there's a lot of other
There's a
things
lot
that
that
we
goes
have
into it.
going on.
Hmm.
And it's hard to, there's only so much time that you have that it's hard to be like, oh, I want to carve out. You have to be really intentional about your time. And with the Koji charcuterie, it really does take up like a good 2 weeks of,
Yeah.
of course you set it and forget it sort of thing, but there's a lot of hands-on tending to it, sort of thing, and you got to just really watch it.
Well, and
Um,
yeah, it can go south on you really like if you don't have the humidity or like if two pieces are touching a little, things like that can go south very quickly because it's all about water activity. And that's the
Definitely.
reason why the Aspergillus doesn't spoil isn't that it wouldn't spoil, it's just that you're putting it where it has just enough salt and just enough moisture
Yeah.
to do what you want it to do rather than what it might want to do or what other organisms might want to do. And so there is a very careful balance to getting that stuff right.
Yeah, definitely. So, but yeah, that was amazing. I know a lot of people actually requested it from people who have supported us from very early
It,
on, and
it
I was
was
like,
very good.
okay, I'll put it on the list, and we'll see if
Just
we
yeah, just
can
keep it in the back of your head.
get it
It's always good
going.
stuff.
But yeah, it's amazing. It's just the flavor Koji makes, as it grows on vegetables, as it breaks down those substrates, it's just umami and just different. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I tried some and I was like, I can't believe that this is like a carrot or a sweet potato right now. This
Yeah.
this could almost be like a good piece of Italian. It wasn't quite
Oh,
like the same
yeah.
spice and fat as Italian salami, but it like
Yeah.
conjures very similar umami deliciousness and like the
Yeah,
texture is there. So, okay, so you've
definitely.
had success, but
Yeah.
I know that everyone who tinkers with this stuff has had failures because I tried making some like mushroom garum last year and
Oh,
I have like the most
wasn't good.
fantastic jar of mold. And I keep it because it just reminds me of my failure, but it keeps evolving and keeps looking weirder. Um, and I don't think I will ever eat it because I'm afraid there's some other mycotoxins or something like that in there. But it's
Yeah.
fascinating. So, what have you made that turned out not so good?
I was experimenting a lot with like nuts,
Hmm.
before I landed on we sell a great cashew miso, that's delicious, and that's actually one of our people love our, I mean, I love our cashew miso, but it's
That
definitely
sounds
one of
awesome.
our top products. And, before we landed on cashew miso, I was trying different substrates, and I had done a peanut one because I was like, oh yeah, peanuts, you can scale that. And the peanuts are kind of a lower
Yeah,
cost
they're
compared
not.
to,
Cashews are some of the most expensive nuts
yeah.
versus peanuts, which are not even technically nuts. So,
Yeah, so yeah, I know. Yeah, I was just actually reading about that today, how cashews are fruits, which are crazy, but that's
yeah,
a
they're
whole
in the
different.
same family as mangoes, and peanuts are harvested in turds. They're actually legumes, so neither of them are
Yeah,
really nuts, you know,
but
botanically.
I made I made a peanut miso, and it was so good, and then it was so bad because it just turned rancid so quickly.
Oh, yeah,
And
the fats just go off really fast.
yeah,
Oh,
and
that's too bad.
so that was too bad. And then I think one time I made a masa miso, which was the same thing. It was so good, and then it was so bad. Like
Mm,
it just turned so moldy, and I don't even. It was so bad. Those two were so bad, that I actually didn't even. I was like, I'm not washing this jar. I'm just
I'm just
toss.
you're just out.
I can't. It's not worth saving $5. It's just like it's just not worth it. So those are the two
Yeah,
off the top of my mind. We have a chicken bone going right now that actually is going. It's going
interesting.
pretty well.
Chicken bone.
Yeah, it's just you get the roasted. We got a roasted rotisserie chicken from Whole Foods, I guess, almost last year. And I figured, all right, this thing has been roasted. I ate the chicken. I'm going to boil the bones for broth.
Okay. Hmm.
I did that, and so then the bones were roasted and then boiled, and they're all soft. So I just put them through my meat grinder, and then I added some koji and salt, and now it's like a pate almost.
Wow,
It's pretty good. I mean, it was
that's
one of
interesting.
those one-offs that I was like, I just wanted to see if I could create flavor with like chicken bones that have been
Yeah.
through everything, like the ultimate no waste project.
Well, I mean,
And
every restaurant is always looking at how do you gain,
or like create product from every single waste products. You know, they save all their vegetable trimmings and they make stock and soups, and but like the idea of like taking, and I've heard of reboiling your bones and stuff like that, like taking bones, grinding them down, and instead of just pitching them, you're like continuing to make a food product that is like not just another food product, but something kind of unique or interesting and like has its own value. You're like, I would almost go through this whole process again just to have this thing. That's cool.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So that was really cool. I mean, that was one of the experiments that we were just a little unsure of, but now I'm like really excited about it because I'm like, oh, well, you know, like now that I know it can be done in a sense, like I'm definitely looking forward to after COVID is over to doing, you know, in-person classes and things like that. And that's definitely one of the ferments I'll be bringing just to show folks that like there's a lot of flavor that actually can be achieved by scraps, you know, whether it's carrot tops or potato peels, all of these things actually, that's what actually makes me super excited about Koji. It's hard to scale like a kind of a no waste sort of thing, but with like, you know, with COVID being over, hopefully we can start doing more community projects and just showing folks like the power of, you know, just a little bit of Koji and then whatever you have at home, even like taking home like ramen broth, like that ramen broth, you put some Koji in there, you let it hang out for a little bit, it ferments into this umami, like umami broth sauce that's very similar to soy sauce that you can use at home, you know, just to cook, and it preserves it so you can use it for a while. A lot of things like that, just like people often waste or they don't think about. Koji is a great way to utilize food waste. So
cool. Well, yeah. That sort of gets at something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. We're very used to the idea of fermentation being something that transforms stuff. And so we talk about fermentation a lot, even though mostly we're just talking about like alcoholic fermentation where yeast takes sugars down to alcohol, or lactic fermentation where bacteria are producing lactic acid and preserving a food by dropping the pH. But Aspergillus and Koji is a filamentous fermentation. So this is, it's sort of like, Aspergillus doesn't produce a mushroom. It produces tiny little, you know, spores and, you know, fruiting bodies, but they're not a big mushroom. But it grows like mycelium. So it's growing through the food and all these little tendrils, and it lives and sits in its food. So it doesn't have like a stomach. Its stomach is outside, which is why it's pumping those enzymes into its food and then absorbing the nutrients from kind of where it's sitting. And that's part of what helps to generate all those amazing flavors and potentially preserve things or change stuff. But it's almost less of a fermentation and more of what I consider to be like a trophic transformation. So this is getting at the idea that like when you go up in trophic levels, you lose a lot of efficiency. So the little zooplankton eat algae and fish eat the zooplankton, and like a bigger fish eats it and a tuna eats it and a shark eats it. And so like every time you go up, you lose a massive amount of efficiency because that's what life is. Life is energy and tropic things running around and stuff banging around the world, but you lose a lot of the energy that's there. And so fungi seem like a really interesting way to like transform stuff and make things more bioavailable, make them more edible, make them more interesting to us as humans, especially because we share a lot of stuff in common with fungi. So like taking a plant protein and turning it into a fungi protein makes it a better mixture of amino acids for us to eat and absorb. And so the idea of like taking waste products or even taking like good plant products, but transforming that, doing this trophic transformation with your fungi is making all of that more interesting. And that's, I love that you're doing this and sort of experimenting in this space. So
yeah, it's been really fun. I mean, we've had some really great, you know, not only from like regular people, like day-to-day chefs or, you know, day-to-day people who are like at-home chefs, but also from like chefs who are interested in using this as, I mean, people don't realize, but Koji is one of the backbones in a lot of Michelin star restaurants. And what's really interesting is we're just wanting to make these products for people, for everyday people. You don't have to be like a Michelin star chef to make awesome food, right? You just have to have some of the right ingredients, the same tools that, you know, or, you know, ingredients that chefs use.
Like a Michelin star chef would be like, my secret to this cream sauce is I'm going to use a little bit of this cashew miso. And I think one of the times we saw you at that, right before COVID shut everything down, but I saw you, Jerry got a little container of that cashew miso and I was milking that stuff because it was so good. And I was like just adding little bits of it to things. I was like, oh, this is so good. But like that makes this what a Michelin star chef would do. And like, you could have the same stuff at home. Hell, you could even probably propagate it yourself and keep it going. But
definitely. I mean, I tell folks all the time, and it's not like a secret. I always tell people who are interested. I'm like, hey, you can make this at home if you want to, but most people then realize it is some work, and
there's work and there's trial and error involved, and you have to like make things sure things are sterile, and you know what contamination is, and so there's a reason to buy from you, because you're like, I'm going to take the work away, here's the good thing,
but everyone has their hobbies, and I always try to support like our local kimchi makers. I can make kimchi, but I'm not going to, I try to support your local bread makers. I know to make bread, I'm not going to,
right.
It's
I'm
like
not waking up at 3 a.m. to do it correctly, but I'll go buy a loaf of good bread,
so it's the same idea. So it's been really awesome, and we've also had a amazing opportunity to just connect with people. That's actually been the biggest joy of the business, is just meeting people, meeting amazing people who are just doing so many different things. Our customers are either like, they're either chefs, or they're in tech, or they're in science, and it's just like winemakers. It's like everyone comes from so many different walks of life, and it's amazing that food like just brings everyone together, which makes what we do just so much more meaningful, I think, because we have an opportunity to connect with such a big group, like a large audience. If you like cooking, most people who love cooking start reading about fermentation, and then they fall into Koji, and they're like, oh, what's that? And luckily, with social media, it's been really easy to kind of reach an audience that's interested in cooking and what we're doing. So
I mean, it's a good moment to be involved in fermentation and some of these sort of alternative ways of looking at food and thinking about it.
Definitely.
And the Bay Area is a good place to be situated. I'm really looking forward to us sort of being able to move beyond the threat of COVID, and being able to like get together for dinners, and like I'd love to go to a restaurant where they're like featuring your stuff in their food, and just because that's the most exciting for me, and probably the most exciting thing for you too, is you're like, it tastes good, you can make a good product, but seeing what someone else does with it in a way that you never would have imagined. And that's I love sending mushroom powders to people, because I'm just like, I know how I cook with mushrooms. What do other people do with this, and what can I learn and gain from their experiences? Everything like compounds and overlays in this incredible way. Like that's, to me, that's the American dream, right? It's that all of us coming together in this big, and they call it a melting pot, but I think of it more like a many layered tapestry and fabric of just, it's like kombucha. Kombucha is just a microbial coral reef, and that culturally and food wise, that's what we're doing, is we're overlaying all these incredible things and learning from each other, and absorbing stuff, and synthesizing, and transforming our own lives into something hopefully more delicious by keeping an eye on what you're doing.
Thanks. But I could not agree more. I think that's what we try to do here. With even our name, Shared Cultures, it's exactly what we're trying to portray. Kevin and I have been trying to sit down and really nail down our story, but in essence, what you said is really a part of it, is that we're just all out here trying to share cultures, and physically in the sense of food, but also metaphorically through learning through each other. And there's so much food out there, and that's what makes fermentation so exciting too, is that you.
Oops, your audio cut out for a sec there.
It's amazing,
Okay.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I got a call coming in.
But
it's just different cultures, different foods. But with fermentation, it doesn't really matter. You could sub this in, swap that out, and flavor. It's just flavor at the end of the day, and everyone can agree on good flavor. So
and I think what you're doing is some people are intimidated by stuff like miso. Like I think most Americans are pretty familiar with soy sauce at this point. But something like miso is still kind of weird. They're like, what is this peanut buttery stuff? Do I spread it on toast? You're like, it might be a little intense. But you don't have to be worried about something like cultural appropriation with food, because that's exactly it. You're like, I'm just taking what I have on hand, and I'm trying to make something delicious. And and we all can agree on deliciousness. And worldwide, we all have the same umami receptors, regardless of your cultural background. So like delicious stuff tastes delicious to us for a reason, because it's good, easy, accessible protein. And I think what you're doing too, by like choosing different substrates and playing around with like what is tradition and what is innovation, is like and especially looking towards the idea of like food waste and how to make things more sustainable, is a really cool way of sort of reimagining our approach to food. And I think we need people like you that are innovators in the space, and can help adopt a new generation of American food culture, because we're actually getting our own indigenous misos and things that people can think more about and feel connected to in a way that, you know, someone who is from, you know, the Southeast or something might not feel connected to a soybean the way that they do to like a black-eyed pea, but you can mess around with it and make that happen. So
Definitely.
Have you ever tried messing with tempeh or making tempeh?
Yeah, we've made tempeh we have made a lot of tempeh actually. So in the early stage when Kevin and I were still trying to figure out what shared cultures would be, you know, we're thinking, oh, maybe we could grow tempeh, and we definitely made a lot of tempeh. We ate a lot of tempeh. We actually now just buy tempeh because we love it. But it's delicious. I mean, but it just at the end of the day, it's an Indonesian food. It comes from Indonesia, and we just couldn't really relate to it, you know, in a cultural sense. And even if we did chickpeas, because we were doing them with chickpeas, with black-eyed peas, with lentils, all of these other substrates, it was still not a food culture that we grew up with or knew very much of. So we just kind of, as we were making more things, we're like, oh no, you know, we're going to stick to something that we feel more who we are as people. So that's been awesome. And I've actually had the pleasure of meeting a local tempeh maker in Oakland, and her name is Febby, and she makes amazing tempeh. So, you know, things like that. And she's Indonesian, which is amazing. But she talks a lot about her food culture. And when we were talking, you know, we just could relate so much because she was just telling me the reasons why she loved making tempeh. And then, you know, I was telling her the reasons why we love doing what we're doing. And it really just comes back to also like our culture and our heritage and expressing that through our ferments, you know, whether it's traditional or not. So it's so.
Yeah, that's cool. I love, you know, just love to hear people reimagining what it is to put food out in the world and how that, you know, how their roots relate to what they're doing now and all that kind of stuff. But so there's something less comfortable to talk about that I wanted to bring up with you and get your thoughts on a little bit. There's been some pretty major anti-Asian American sentiments passed around this country, certainly in the last couple of years. And I think a couple of days ago was hopefully the worst of it. I don't want to see anything worse. But there's been some pretty major stuff. And I think, you know, as an Asian American woman, what have you dealt with in your life that you kind of like feeds into that, or, you know, do you have impressions upon this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough because Asian American or Asian racism is really subtle. You know, there isn't like a swastika or like something that's so blatantly like racist. There's not a symbol or anything like that. But, you know, I with what happened in Georgia the other day, just really, I've been having a hard time just really compacting that information, and you know, it's almost like I don't want to take it personal, but like you kind of take it personal, you know, and you know, it's been tough because it's hard in the 21st century to even think that racism exists, but it does, obviously. And
clearly does.
Yeah, I mean, when I was little, I remember my first touch with racism was actually, we had a grocery store right across the street, and it was called the Fruit Barn, and we'd go there all the time to buy groceries and stuff. And I actually ended up working there. That was my first job when I was 13, because the owner had saw me grow up. And I remember when I was 5 or something like that, I was in line, and my dad told me to hold, you know, like, stay here. I forgot the milk. I'll be right back. And I remember going, you know, waiting in line. I was like 5 or 4 or something like that. And I remember my dad coming back, and the guy behind us told us to get in the back of the line and called us chinks. And I remember my dad being like really upset about that.
And you're like, you didn't understand what the big deal was at the time?
Yeah, I was because, like, why is everyone, and all of a sudden I just remember there was a huge fight. Like my dad said something, the guy like turned and like tried to punch him, and then the store owner had to get it. It was like really big, and I just didn't realize that word was so triggering. And you know, as you grow up, then, you know, I just remember the big emotional fallout from that. And then, you know, as I grew up, you know, you kind of hear like Asian jokes, you know. I remember one was like, oh, if you close your eyes, you can blind him or her with floss, or like, you know, things like that, you know, like just really stupid child. But you know, it's hard because it's like, was that malicious? I don't know. Like, were they just joking? So I mean, a lot of this stuff I've dealt with, and you know, and I remember being like, you know, called Orientals, even by like American, like I would go over to my American friends' homes, and like the grandpa or the grandma, it's like, oh, your Oriental friend is coming, and just like things like that. But it's you know, it's really tough because it's like, is that malicious? You know, like I would always tell them like, hey, that's not okay. And I don't feel comfortable being called an Oriental. But like, you know, my friends would be like, well, but grandma and grandpa, or even my parents, like, they're not being malicious.
Right.
Like
It's just an old fashioned word. And you know, I remember growing up, there was a flavor of ramen that was Oriental ramen. I was like, this is my favorite, but you know, it wasn't until later in life that I was like, it's weird that there's a ramen still called Oriental. I think they finally changed it, but it took like many, many years.
Yeah, so you know, things like that, and you know, I've done. I think a lot of my Asian friends have dealt with this, but I think now with what's happening, it's just like, I think people are now really starting to realize, like, you know, those Asian jokes, or you know, a lot of all of this stuff is not okay. Even like I remember like growing up, people, or even in college, you know, like I would show up at a college party, and people would ask like, oh, where are you from? You know, like, oh, I'm from San Francisco. But yeah, but where's your family from? And it's like, who cares? Like, I just told you I'm from San Francisco, and like you haven't even asked me my name yet. So like things like that, you know, like I wouldn't go up to a white person and be like, where are you from? Oh, like I'm from San Francisco, but where are your parents from? You
Yeah,
know, like
yeah, it's not a question. I tell people, you know, the city I was born in, and that's the end of the discussion.
yeah,
Occasionally people look, I mean, because I'm kind of gingery, I'll ask a lot, like, oh, are you Irish? Are you Scottish? Or like whatever.
yeah,
And it's like, I don't love being judged on my appearance either. And so in some ways I kind of relate, because I'm like a
yeah,
little bit different looking of a white person, although I consider
yeah,
myself more of a pink person than a white person. But that's aside. You know,
yeah,
it doesn't feel great to get complimented, or not complimented, but even just commented on your physical appearance. You're like, what about me
yeah,
as a person? Let's
person,
talk about
yeah.
that before we get into the way that I look, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So, you know, it's just all of these things. I have been thinking about it, but it's just so heartbreaking to see. And, you know, the one positive thing though I've noticed from all of this is like I feel like more people are trying to be more well informed, and also I've had a lot of people reach out and say like, oh, how can we support you? And I've seen a lot of my friends, or even people in the community, just like putting together like Asian American businesses that they can support, or you know, Asian American like organizations within the Greater Bay Area, or in whatever city they're in, nonprofits that are doing the work to raise awareness or provide resources. I know certainly when my grandma came from China to San Francisco, she didn't speak any English, and she relied on a lot of those public resources to help her get by. You know, like, how do you take the bus? Like, you know, and they would have manuals like printed out, like translated, like this is the stop sign, like get off here if you want to,
Right.
you know, things like that. Just like a lot of public resources, I
Well,
think.
and those resources are part of the reason that Asian Americans are well integrated in the cultural fabric
Yeah,
of America, because Chinatowns exist everywhere, and they would set people up. They'd take new immigrants and help them learn the language, help them learn how to start a business, and
definitely.
give them models of business that they could follow, which is why there's so many Chinese restaurants, because they're
Yeah.
like, this is successful. Let's keep doing it, you know?
Definitely, definitely. So, you know, I feel like I'm hopeful that, like, I'm kind of hurt, and you know, like I said, I almost feel like I don't want to take it personal, but I am, you know, sort of thing. And it's just, I'm hopeful that there's healing after this, and that it almost feels like even with COVID, right? Like we almost needed like it's sad, but it's like, I feel like we needed it, like COVID, to kind of,
Something really shocking, or like Capitol riots. We needed
yeah,
something to shake us up and realize that
yeah,
this is not okay. We
yeah,
need to talk about this actively. We need to do something about it.
definitely, definitely.
We can definitely do better. And you know, I'm hopeful too, because I keep hoping that people remember that we're all American.
Yeah, I
And
know.
it's just crazy to me that like there's Americans killing Americans and people aren't upset about it. Like, what?
It's it's so crazy to me. At the end of the day, America is just a land of immigrants, and people, everyone came here for a better
Right.
life, you
All
know?
of us except for the
The natives,
actual
yeah.
indigenous Native
Yeah,
Americans are
yeah,
immigrants. And it's important to remember that. There's no, you know, I don't care if your family's been here for 150 years or 5 years.
yeah.
We're all American. And, you know,
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, it's shocking to me that America there's racism, because I mean, out of all the countries, not saying racism's okay, but I mean, like, I'm just in general, like America, we all came here from different places. So it should be a place of of acceptance. And the other day I saw a video of like I know it's circulating around social media about that Asian grandma who like beat up her attacker in San Francisco. And it's so heartbreaking to me to see that, because like this woman came from China where she doesn't speak English. She's minding her own business. Like, that's insane to me that in San Francisco, which is one of the most progressive cities in the world,
and one of the most integrated, and you would not expect an act of open violence against like an 80-year-old woman. And like, I know that people were applauding her for like fighting back, but like an 80-year-old lady shouldn't have to fight back to defend herself against a guy. Someone should have stepped in before that guy ever took the first swing at that lady,
I agree. And so, things like that, that's the thing that kind of troubles me is that you just start seeing, things like that in our own communities, in a community that I thought was more progressive, that, that I thought like, oh, my 5-year-old self would only see once, like experience racism once or twice. And it's unfortunate that I've in San Francisco and growing up, I've had these experiences, but like I said, with something like this, it's like we all kind of maybe needed something big, the bigger picture to shock us. And, even with Black Lives Matter, it's like, I had those discussions with my own parents, and there's a dialogue with like, growing up, my parents had never really seen Black people before, and they were afraid of them. And actually my uncle got shot by a Black person growing up in our neighborhood. And so there was always this like racism, like, secret racism in our family. But, speaking to them about it now, it's like, well, I still remember the time that Dad and I were being profiled against in that grocery store for just the color of our skin. Like, you can't just subject every Black person to that man who shot our uncle. He's fine, but like he got shot in the arm. It was just a drive-by shooting, but like things like that, it's important to have these conversations. And I think these conversations stem from big picture incidences.
They do. It's never comfortable. It's something that I'm like, I wish we could have just talked about fermentation and Koji the whole time, but like I think it's important that we bring it up and we like make light of it, because everybody has to play a part, and you have to have those conversations with friends and family, and whether or not your friends and family are part of the problem or part of the solution, you need to talk to them regardless.
Definitely. So, I mean, the more people talk about these things, the more awareness and understanding and come from it. And so I'm glad we're able to kind of speak on that today. But it's heartbreaking, but I'm just hopeful that this is hopefully this is the last thing we really hear, because you hear about all the slashing in New York of that gentleman's face on the subway, and you hear about the attacks in Oakland, and it's like, how is this? Why is this? How
is this happening? Why is this happening? Yeah, I mean, it's a reminder that all of us need to be aware. We need to step up. If you see something that doesn't look right, step up, say something, stand in the way. People target people that they think are powerless and don't have someone to defend them. So step up and defend the powerless. I think that's one of the most important things we can do. Anyone can do is stand up and fight for those who can't necessarily fight for themselves.
Yeah, so. Definitely. So I'm glad we're on the same page. So I know a lot of people are on the same page. It's just, just always a few bad eggs, like the people who like leave their dog poop in the park in a bag and ruin it for everyone else.
And not every single person who leaves their dog poop is inherently a bad person, but they did something bad and they made a bad decision. And I don't think people would do, if there was someone else behind them, if they knew that someone else was on the trail to see them do that, they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So that's a reason that if you do see someone doing that, say something, and be like, hey, sir, I think you forgot this.
Yeah. I've definitely done that before, and I've done it. I've called people out for even carving names in trees, because I don't think that's okay for you to be carving your big, I love your high school sweetheart in a big
you guys are going to break up before that tree heals over, for sure.
That's not cool. I've caught people doing that, and I've had to say something, because I just tell them, like, you do realize by doing that, that's going to be there forever and you're harming the tree. Like, I don't understand why you're doing that. So it's important to speak up, and especially with sensitive topics like racism and subtle racism, you know, things that
even subtle examples. And it's that's the joke you told, you know, is the floss over your eyes. And you're like, I get that you think that's funny. And while there's some inherent like humor to it, it's not funny. And it's like not just, it's a joke you should take out of your rotation, you know?
Yeah. But, you know, I think now with all of this happening, I'm hopeful that people are starting to realize that all those jokes are actually pretty hurtful. And because we're just trying to be, you know, be cool and like not raise alarms and just like, you know, like, I guess when I was younger, I was just like want to fit in college, right? And like I went to a predominantly white college in Tucson, and you know, just trying to fit in, make friends. I would like laugh it off or brush it aside, and just be like, I was just always told myself like, my friends are not being malicious, and that's the
they
thing.
Don't, it's not coming from a mean place, but they don't know that it is mean, and so it's worth if you can tell people without, you're not trying to offend them back. But you have to let them know that what they said might not be okay. And that is uncomfortable to have that conversation. Holy shit, it doesn't feel good. But like now is the time to have those conversations, as we said. So
for sure. So I think even for me throughout all of this, I've been thinking about that today, and also thinking like, you know, all those times those jokes were said, I should have spoken up for myself and been like, hey guys, like that's a funny joke, I guess, but like at my expense, but it's really not that funny. It's a little offensive.
It's also,
you know?
it's also not on you. One of your friends should have realized what they were saying, because I'm sure one of them knew, hey, this isn't super cool to be saying these jokes to her. Someone else should have been like, hey guys, lay off it, you know? And that's on all of us. It's not on you. And that's just like that 80-year-old woman shouldn't have had to defend herself, you know, and punch the guy back. It's all our responsibility.
I know. It's tough though. So, you know, I'm taking today to kind of still think about these things, and, you know, just try to move on, and, you know, just hope for a better tomorrow, you know, because that's all you can do. So
that's a powerful sentiment. And I'm really thankful that you took the time to sit down and chat with me. I got to get online and order some like Koji stuff or some, especially that cashew miso, because I remember really geeking out on that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad
it was really good.
Yeah,
you've inspired me too, because I have like a container of like liquid Koji in the fridge that I haven't done anything with, and so I need to like mess around with that. And
definitely. So. Well, it's been awesome to catch up with you. I mean, like you and I can't remember where we met, but it's been a while.
It might have been at Mario's house, maybe.
Maybe
at
our friend Mario's house. But you know, it's been really cool to kind of go from, I mean, we're still just starting out our business. I still think we're in the early stage, but you know, you met me before I had even like really started anything. So it's been awesome
and I'm sure if we talk again in 5 years, you're going to be an insanely wealthy, insanely successful CEO of a multinational food company. And
well, maybe not that, but you know, hopefully.
Well, hopefully you'll be happy. That's what's important to me. It doesn't matter what your level of financial success is, as long as you're happy. So.
Yeah, well, we're looking forward to really building this company out, not just for ourselves, but also for, you know, our community. And we're excited about workshops in the future. And I know a lot of our customers love mushrooms. So I had told a lot of people, like, you know, after COVID's over, maybe we can do some like forays and stuff, because all it is just people who are interested in our products are also just interested in fungi in general. And fermenting. I feel like foraging, fermentation are all kind of hand in hand.
It all overlays in that giant tapestry of interesting stuff that you just kind of layer it up, and you're like, oh man, this is life. Life is so nuanced and complex and amazing, and all of it feeds and you know, be like the Aspergillus growing through the fabric, the substrate of life, and like try to absorb it all and learn it all if you can, because there's so much to gain and find out from it.
Definitely. So, you know, we're looking forward to doing more with our community, and, you know, as soon as COVID is over, which I'm sure soon, you know, I'm actually getting my second shot next week. So I'm super excited.
There you go. Yeah, I got one down, and next one's in April. So.
Yeah. So, you know, and once we're all vaxxed, I think it'll just be good. I mean, I feel like I'm super hopeful for this year, and it's only just beginning. So.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it. Awesome. Big fan of what you do. And I hope that some other people see this and are inspired by you as well. So
yeah, thanks so much for inviting me here to talk with you. It's always a pleasure. And, we love your work. I mean, I'm definitely, I'm just subscribed to you on Shared Cultures and my personal, as you know, and all your content is just fantastic. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you do great work. So anyways.
Awesome.
Right,
well, it's good. Say hi to Kevin for me. I'll say hi to Jerry for you.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, talk to you soon.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.